When the dangerous gangster entered the convenience store that afternoon, the black woman who owned the shop braced herself for another threat. But when he called her by name, with a voice he had never used before, she froze. The bell above the convenience store door jingled, alerting Keisha to a new customer. She glanced up from the magazine she was flipping through, her heart sinking as she recognized the man walking in. It was Jaden, the notorious gangster who had been coming around more often lately, demanding his so-called protection fees. Keisha straightened her posture, determined not to show any fear. She had been running this store on her own for the past 3 years, and she wasn't about to let some thug intimidate her. "Jaden," she greeted him coolly. "What brings you here today?" Jaden sauntered up to the counter, his eyes roaming over the cigarette display behind Keisha. "Just checking in, making sure everything's running smoothly." Keisha crossed her arms. "Everything's fine, as always. But I'm guessing that's not the only reason you're here." A smirk played on Jaden's lips. "Perceptive as ever, Keisha. You know the drill. It's time for this month's payment." Keisha sighed, reaching under the counter for the envelope of cash she had reluctantly set aside. She handed it to Jaden, her jaw clenched. "Here. Now, if that's all, I have customers to attend to." Jaden pocketed the envelope, but he made no move to leave. Instead, he leaned against the counter, studying Keisha with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You know, Keisha, I gotta admit, I admire your spirit. Not many people in this neighborhood would have the guts to talk to me the way you do." Keisha met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not afraid of you, Jaden. I'm just trying to run an honest business here." Jaden chuckled. "An honest business in a dishonest world? That's a rare thing." He pushed off from the counter, turning to leave. But before he reached the door, he glanced back at Keisha, his expression unreadable. "See you around, Keisha. Stay safe out there." With that, he was gone, the bell jingling in his wake. Keisha released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Encounters with Jaden always left her feeling unsettled, but she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Shaking off the strange interaction, Keisha turned her attention back to the magazine, trying to lose herself in the glossy pages. But her mind kept drifting back to Jaden and the way he had looked at her, as if he saw something in her that no one else did. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and transactions, the familiar routine of running the store providing a welcome distraction from her thoughts. As the sun began to set, Keisha started closing up shop, counting the day's earnings and restocking the shelves. Just as she was about to lock the front door, she caught a glimpse of movement across the street. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized Jaden's figure, leaning against a lamppost and watching the store. For a moment, their eyes met, and Keisha felt a jolt of something she couldn't quite define. Fear, curiosity, something else entirely. Jaden pushed off from the lamppost and melted into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Keisha locked the door with trembling hands, her mind racing. What did Jaden want from her? And why couldn't she shake the feeling that their lives were about to become inexorably intertwined? As Keisha made her way home that night, the questions lingered, haunting her dreams and setting the stage for the events that were about to unfold. The next day, Keisha opened the store as usual, trying to push thoughts of Jaden to the back of her mind. She had a business to run, and she couldn't afford to be distracted by the enigmatic gangster who seemed to have taken an interest in her. As the morning wore on, Keisha found herself growing increasingly exhausted. The constant stress of running the store, combined with the lingering unease from her encounters with Jaden, was starting to take its toll. She was just about to take a break when the bell above the door jingled, signaling a new customer. Keisha looked up, her heart sinking as she saw Jaden walking in, his expression unreadable. "Back so soon?" Keisha asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I thought you only came around once a month." Jaden shrugged, approaching the counter. "What can I say? I was in the neighborhood." He leaned against the counter, his eyes searching Keisha's face. "You look tired, Keisha. Everything okay?" Keisha bristled at his apparent concern. "I'm fine. Just a long day." Jaden nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "You work too hard. You know that. You should take a break every once in a while." Keisha scoffed. "And let the store fall apart. I don't think so." Jaden chuckled, shaking his head. Always so stubborn. He reached out, his fingers brushing against Keisha's hand. She jerked back, surprised by the sudden contact. "What are you doing?" she asked, her heart racing. Jaden withdrew his hand, his expression unreadable. "Just trying to make a connection, Keisha. Is that so wrong?" Keisha stared at him, her mind reeling. What was happening here? Why was Jaden acting like this? Before she could respond, Jaden leaned in, his face inches from hers. "You intrigue me, Keisha. There's something about you that I can't quite figure out." Keisha swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry. I don't know what you're talking about." Jaden smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that sent shivers down Keisha's spine. "I think you do." And then, before Keisha could react, Jaden closed the distance between them, his lips pressing against hers in a searing kiss. Keisha froze, her mind going blank. She should push him away. She knew that. But for a moment, just a moment, she found herself melting into the kiss, her body responding to Jaden's touch in a way she had never experienced before. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the kiss was over. Jaden pulled back, his eyes dark with an emotion Keisha couldn't quite decipher. "I'll see you around, Keisha," he said, his voice low and rough. And with that, he turned and walked out of the store, leaving Keisha standing there, her lips tingling and her heart racing. What had just happened? And why did she feel like her entire world had just been turned upside down? As the day wore on, Keisha found herself replaying the kiss over and over again in her mind. She was angry with herself for allowing it to happen, for letting Jaden get under her skin like that. But at the same time, she couldn't deny the way her body had reacted to his touch, the way her heart had raced at the feel of his lips on hers. As the sun began to set and the store emptied out, Keisha caught sight of a familiar figure across the street, Jaden, leaning against a lamppost, watching her through the window. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Keisha felt a jolt of electricity pass between them. And then, Jaden pushed off from the lamppost and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Keisha alone with her thoughts and the memory of his kiss. The rumors started not long after that. Whispers on the street about Jaden's frequent visits to the store, about the way he looked at Keisha when he thought no one was watching. Keisha tried to ignore them, but she could feel the weight of the community's judgment on her shoulders. She was the outsider, the woman who had dared to stand up to Jaden and his gang, and now she was paying the price. But even as the whispers grew louder and the stares more pointed, Keisha found herself unable to stop thinking about Jaden, about the way he made her feel, the way her body responded to his touch. She knew it was wrong, knew that getting involved with a man like Jaden could only lead to trouble. But as the days turned into weeks and Jaden's visits became more frequent, Keisha found herself drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. And so, She did the only thing she could do. She waited, her heart in her throat, for the moment when Jaden would walk through the door and turn her world upside down once again. As the days turned into weeks, Keisha found herself growing more and more conflicted about her feelings for Jaden. On one hand, she knew that getting involved with a man like him was a recipe for disaster. He was a gangster, a criminal, someone who lived by a code that Keisha could never understand or condone. But on the other hand, she couldn't deny the way he made her feel. The way her heart raced when he walked into the store. The way her skin tingled when he brushed against her. It was like nothing she had ever experienced before. And despite her better judgment, Keisha found herself craving more. Jaden's visits to the store became more frequent, and with each one, he revealed a little more about himself. He told Keisha about his childhood, about growing up on the streets and the choices he had been forced to make to survive. He spoke of his family, or lack thereof, and the loneliness that had driven him to seek solace in the gang. Keisha listened, her heart aching for the boy Jaden had once been. She could see the pain in his eyes, the scars that life had left on his soul. And despite everything, she found herself wanting to heal those wounds, to show Jaden that there was more to life than the violence and brutality of the streets. But even as Keisha and Jaden grew closer, the danger that surrounded them only intensified. Jaden's gang was growing suspicious of his frequent visits to the store, and Keisha could feel the tension in the air whenever they were together. One evening, as Keisha was closing up the store, she heard a commotion outside. She peered through the window, her heart sinking as she saw a group of men surrounding Jaden, their faces twisted with anger and betrayal. Keisha watched, her heart in her throat, as Jaden tried to reason with them. But it was no use. The men were out for blood, and they weren't going to stop until they got it. Without thinking, Keisha burst out of the store, rushing to Jaden's side. The men turned to her, their eyes wide with surprise and suspicion. "Leave him alone," Keisha said, her voice shaking but determined. "He hasn't done anything wrong." The men laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that made Keisha's skin crawl. "Hasn't done anything wrong," one of them sneered. "He's been spending all his time with you, neglecting his duties to the gang. That's a betrayal in our book." Keisha shook her head, her eyes blazing with defiance. "He's not betraying anyone. He's just trying to live his life, to find something more than the violence and hate that you all thrive on." The men exchanged glances, their expressions darkening. "You don't know what you're talking about, girl," one of them growled. "Jaden's one of us, whether he likes it or not. And if he's not with us, he's against us." Keisha opened her mouth to argue, but Jaden cut her off. "Enough," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'll handle this." He turned to the men, his eyes narrowed. "I'm not betraying anyone," he said, his voice steady. "I'm just trying to find my own way. And if that means leaving the gang, then so be it." The men stared at him, their expressions a mix of shock and anger. "You can't just leave," one of them said, his voice rising. "You know too much? You've seen too much. You're a liability now." Jaden shook his head, his jaw clenched. "I'm not a liability. I'm a human being, with my own thoughts and feelings, and I'm done letting you control me." The men exchanged glances, their hands drifting towards their waistbands. Keisha's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with possibilities. But before anyone could make a move, Jaden spoke again. "I'm leaving," he said, his voice calm and determined. "And I'm taking Keisha with me. We're going to start a new life, away from all of this." The men stared at him, their expressions a mix of disbelief and fury. "You can't just walk away," one of them said, his voice shaking with rage. "We'll find you, and we'll make you pay." Jaden shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "No, you won't, because by the time you do, we'll be long gone." And with that, he took Keisha's hand and led her away, into the night and towards an uncertain future. The night was cold and dark as Keisha and Jaden made their way through the streets, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. They had no idea where they were going or what the future held, but they knew that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. As they walked, Keisha's mind raced with thoughts of the life she was leaving behind. The store, the community, the people she had come to know and care for over the years. It was all disappearing behind her, fading into the distance like a half-remembered dream. But even as she mourned the loss of her old life, Keisha couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and excitement for what lay ahead. She was starting a new chapter, one that promised love, adventure, and the chance to build something truly special with the man she had come to care for so deeply. Jaden, too, seemed lost in thought as they walked, his hand gripping Keisha's tightly. She could only imagine what was going through his mind, the weight of the decision he had just made and the consequences that would inevitably follow. But when he turned to her, his eyes shining with a fierce determination, Keisha knew that he had no regrets. "We're going to make it, Keisha," he said, his voice low and steady. "I promise you that. We're going to build a new life together, one that's free from all the pain and violence of the past." Keisha nodded, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. "I know we will, Jaden. As long as we have each other, we can do anything." They walked for hours, their feet aching and their bodies shivering from the cold. But they didn't stop, driven by a desperate need to put as much distance between themselves and the city as possible. Finally, as the first rays of dawn began to peek over the horizon, they stumbled upon a small, abandoned building on the outskirts of town. It was old and run down, with boarded-up windows and a sagging roof. But to Keisha and Jaden, it was a sanctuary. They made their way inside, their eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls. The space was small and musty, with a few old crates and a mattress that had seen better days. But it was shelter, and for now, that was enough. Jaden set to work immediately, his hands moving with a sense of purpose as he began to clear away the debris and make the space livable. Keisha watched him, her heart swelling with pride and admiration for the man he was becoming before her very eyes. For the next few days, they stayed hidden in the abandoned building, venturing out only to scavenge for food and supplies. They knew that Jaden's former gang would be looking for them, and they couldn't risk being seen or recognized. But even in the midst of the fear and uncertainty, Keisha and Jaden found moments of joy and laughter. They talked for hours, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for their future. They held each other close, their bodies intertwined as they slept, finding comfort and strength in each other's embrace. And slowly, day by day, they began to build a new life together. Jaden found work as a mechanic at a local garage, his skills and dedication quickly earning him the respect and admiration of his co-workers. Keisha, too, found a job at a small grocery store, her warm smile and kind heart endearing her to the customers and her fellow employees. They saved every penny they could, scrimping and saving until they had enough to put a down payment on a small, run-down house on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but to Keisha and Jaden, It was everything. As they stood in the doorway of their new home, their arms wrapped around each other and their eyes shining with tears of joy, Keisha knew that they had made it. They had escaped the darkness of their past and found a new beginning, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. And as Jaden leaned down to kiss her, his lips soft and warm against her own, Keisha knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, hand in hand, heart to heart. Months passed, and Keisha and Jaden settled into their new life together. Their small, run-down house slowly transformed into a cozy home, filled with laughter, love, and the warmth of their growing bond. But even as they reveled in their newfound happiness, Jaden couldn't shake the nagging sense of unease that plagued his thoughts. He knew that his former gang wouldn't let him go so easily, that they would stop at nothing to punish him for his betrayal. He tried to push the thoughts away, to focus on the present and the future he was building with Keisha. But the fear lingered, a constant shadow at the edge of his consciousness. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jaden finally voiced his concerns. "I'm worried, Keisha," he said, his voice low and strained. "I can't shake the feeling that they're going to come after us, that they're not going to let us live in peace." Keisha reached over and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "I know, Jaden, but we can't live our lives in fear. We have to trust in each other, in the strength of our love. We've come too far to let them win now." Jaden nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "You're right. We have to be prepared, to be ready for anything. But we also have to live our lives, to build the future we've always dreamed of." They sat in silence for a moment, their hands clasped tightly together as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. And then, with a deep breath, Jaden stood up and pulled Keisha to her feet. "Come on," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Let's go inside. I have something I want to show you." Keisha followed him into the house, her curiosity piqued. Jaden led her to the kitchen table, where a small, velvet box sat waiting. With trembling hands, he picked up the box and turned to face her. "See, Keisha," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "from the moment I met you, I knew that my life would never be the same. You showed me that there was more to life than violence and fear, that I could be a better man, a man worthy of your love." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "I know that our future is uncertain, that we'll face challenges and obstacles along the way, but I also know that with you by my side, I can face anything. Will you marry me, Keisha? Will you be my partner, my love, my everything?" Keisha stared at him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, Jaden, I will marry you. I will be your partner, your love, your everything, forever and always." Jaden slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking with excitement and nerves. And then, with a triumphant shout, he swept her into his arms and spun her around the room, their laughter echoing off the walls. They celebrated late into the night, their hearts full of love and hope for the future. And as they lay in bed together, their bodies intertwined and their hearts beating as one, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, hand in hand, heart to heart. But even as they reveled in their happiness, the shadows of the past loomed ever closer. Jaden's former gang, enraged by his betrayal and determined to make him pay, had not forgotten their vow of vengeance. They watched and waited, biding their time until the moment was right. And then, on a dark and moonless night, they struck. The sound of shattering glass jolted Keisha and Jaden from their sleep, their hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. They leapt from the bed, their minds racing as they tried to make sense of the chaos erupting around them. The gang members poured into the house, their faces twisted with rage and hatred. Jaden fought them off with all his strength, his fists flying and his body moving with a fluid grace born of desperation and love. But there were too many of them, and soon he was overwhelmed, his body battered and bruised as they dragged him from the house. Keisha screamed and fought, her nails raking at their faces and her feet kicking with all her might. But it was no use. The gang members overpowered her, their hands rough and cruel as they held her back, forcing her to watch as they beat Jaden senseless. And then, with a final, brutal blow, they left him lying on the ground, his body broken and his spirit shattered. They turned to Keisha, their eyes glinting with malice and triumph. "This is what happens to those who betray us," they hissed, their voices dripping with venom. "Remember that, girl? Remember that we own you, that we control your fate." And with that, they were gone, melting into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. Keisha rushed to Jaden's side, her heart breaking as she cradled his battered body in her arms. She knew that they had to leave, that they couldn't stay in this place any longer. But as she looked down at the man she loved, his face pale and his breathing shallow, she knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, filled with challenges and uncertainties. But she also knew that they would face them together, that their love would be their strength and their guide. And so, with a quiet determination, she lifted Jaden to his feet and helped him into the house, ready to begin the next chapter of their journey together. The night was dark and cold as Keisha helped Jaden into the car, her hands trembling with fear and exhaustion. They had hastily packed a few belongings, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they were leaving behind everything they had worked so hard to build. Jaden winced in pain as he settled into the passenger seat, his face a mask of bruises and swelling. Keisha felt a rush of anger and helplessness as she looked at him, her heart breaking at the thought of what he had endured. But there was no time for tears or recriminations. They had to move, had to put as much distance between themselves and the city as possible. Keisha started the engine and pulled out onto the empty street, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of pursuit. They drove in silence for hours, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional muffled groan from Jaden as he shifted in his seat. Keisha's mind raced with thoughts of the future, of the uncertainties that lay ahead. She knew that they couldn't go back to their old lives, that the gang would never stop hunting them. But where could they go? How could they start over again, with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the love in their hearts? As dawn began to break over the horizon, Keisha spotted a small, run-down motel on the side of the road. She pulled into the parking lot, her heart pounding with exhaustion and fear. They checked in under false names, paying in cash for a small, dingy room on the ground floor. Keisha helped Jaden inside, easing him down onto the lumpy mattress and covering him with a thin, scratchy blanket. She sat beside him, her hand stroking his hair as he drifted off into a fitful sleep. And then, with a heavy sigh, she rose to her feet and began to pace the room, her mind spinning with plans and possibilities. They couldn't stay here long, she knew that. The gang would be searching for them, and it was only a matter of time before they were found. They needed to keep moving, to find a place where they could disappear and start anew. But where? Keisha racked her brain, trying to think of somewhere, anywhere, that they could go. And then, like a bolt of lightning, it hit her. She remembered a small, remote town that she had read about years ago, a place nestled deep in the mountains, far from the reach of the city and its gangs. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance they had. Keisha shook Jaden awake, her voice urgent and low. "Jaden, we have to go. I know a place, somewhere we can start over. But we have to leave now, before they find us." Jaden nodded, his eyes glazed with pain and exhaustion. Together, they gathered their meager belongings and slipped out of the motel room, their hearts pounding with fear and determination. They drove for days, stopping only for gas and food, their eyes always scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. And then, finally, they arrived. The town was small and quiet, nestled in a valley between two towering mountain peaks. The air was crisp and clean, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to stretch on forever. Keisha and Jaden found a small, abandoned cabin on the outskirts of town, its walls weathered and its roof sagging. But to them, it was a palace, a sanctuary from the chaos and violence of the city. They set to work immediately, clearing out the debris and fixing up the cabin as best they could. Jaden found work as a handyman, his skills and strength quickly earning him a reputation as the go-to guy for any job, big or small. Keisha, too, found her place in the community, volunteering at the local library and teaching reading classes to the town's children. And slowly, day by day, they began to heal, to build a new life together in this quiet, peaceful place. But even as they settled into their new routine, Keisha couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She would catch Jaden staring off into the distance, his eyes haunted and his jaw clenched tight. She knew that he was struggling, that the memories of his past and the guilt over what he had done were eating away at him. And so, one evening, as they sat together on the porch of their little cabin, Keisha took his hand and looked deep into his eyes. "Jaden," she said softly, her voice filled with love and understanding, "I know that you're hurting, that you're carrying a heavy burden, but you don't have to carry it alone. I'm here for you, always and forever. We'll get through this together, one day at a time." Jaden's eyes filled with tears, his body shaking with silent sobs, and then, with a deep, shuddering breath, he began to talk, to pour out all the pain and guilt and fear that he had been holding inside for so long. Keisha listened, her heart breaking for the man she loved. And when he was finished, she took him in her arms and held him close, whispering words of love and comfort into his ear. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the sky. And as they held each other, they knew that they had found something precious, something worth fighting for. They had found a home, a place where they could heal and grow and love. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, they knew that they would face them together, hand in hand, heart to heart, forever and always. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. As Keisha and Jaden settled into their new life in the small mountain town, they worked hard, building a reputation as reliable and trustworthy members of the community, and slowly but surely, they began to heal from the wounds of their past. But even as they found peace and happiness in their new home, they knew that they could never fully escape the shadows of their former lives. The memories of the gang, of the violence and fear that had once consumed them, lingered like ghosts at the edges of their minds. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, Jaden turned to Keisha with a serious expression on his face. "Keisha," he said softly, his voice heavy with emotion, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been keeping inside for a long time." Keisha felt a flicker of worry in her heart, but she nodded encouragingly, taking Jaden's hand in her own. "You know that I used to be a part of that gang," Jaden continued, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "But what you don't know is how I got involved in the first place. It's a story I've never told anyone, not even you." He took a deep breath, his grip tightening on Keisha's hand. "When I was a kid, my dad was killed in a drive-by shooting. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it destroyed my family. My mom couldn't cope, and she started using drugs to numb the pain. She'd disappear for days at a time, leaving me and my little sister to fend for ourselves." Keisha felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, her heart aching for the pain and loss that Jaden had endured. "I tried to take care of my sister," Jaden continued, his voice cracking with emotion. "But I was just a kid myself, and I didn't know how to keep us safe. That's when the gang found me. They offered me protection, a sense of belonging, and I was too young and scared to say no." He shook his head, his eyes glimmering with tears. "I did terrible things, Keisha, things I'm ashamed of, but I didn't know any other way to survive. The gang was my family, my life, and I couldn't imagine a future without them." Keisha reached out and cupped Jaden's face in her hands, her thumb brushing away the tears that had begun to fall. "Jaden," she said softly, her voice filled with love and understanding, "you were just a child. You did what you had to do to survive, to protect yourself and your sister. That doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you human." Jaden's shoulders shook with silent sobs, his body trembling with the weight of his past. Keisha held him close, whispering words of love and comfort into his ear until his tears subsided. "I don't deserve you," Jaden murmured, his face buried in Keisha's neck. "I don't deserve this life, this happiness, not after everything I've done." Keisha pulled back, her eyes fierce with determination. "You listen to me, Jaden. You deserve every bit of happiness that comes your way. You deserve to be loved, to be cherished, to be free from the chains of your past. And I will spend every day of my life making sure that you know that." Jaden's eyes widened, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. He pulled Keisha into a passionate kiss, their lips moving together in a dance of love and devotion. When they finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, Jaden rested his forehead against Keisha's, his eyes shining with a new sense of hope and purpose. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for loving me, for believing in me, for giving me a reason to keep going." Keisha smiled, her heart overflowing with love and pride. "You never have to thank me for that, Jaden. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." They sat together on the porch for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms as the stars twinkled overhead. And as they held each other close, they knew that they had found something precious, something unbreakable. They had found a love that could weather any storm, a bond that could never be broken. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, they knew that they would face them together, hand in hand, heart to heart, forever and always. The sun rose over the mountains, casting a warm glow over the small cabin where Keisha and Jaden lay sleeping. Keisha stirred first, her eyes fluttering open as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window. She turned to look at Jaden, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips as she watched him sleep. He looked so peaceful, so content, his face relaxed and free from the worries that had plagued him for so long. Keisha slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded into the kitchen to start the coffee. She had just poured herself a steaming mug when she heard a knock at the door. Frowning, she set down her coffee and went to answer it, her heart pounding with a sudden sense of unease. When she opened the door, she found herself face to face with a man she had never seen before, his eyes hard and his expression grim. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. The man held up a badge, his voice gruff and official. "I'm Detective Johnson with the County Sheriff's Department. I'm looking for Jaden Thompson." Keisha felt her blood run cold, her mind racing with possibilities. Had the gang found them? Were they in danger once again? "I'm sorry, but Jaden's not available right now," she said carefully, her hand tightening on the doorknob. "Can I ask what this is about?" The detective's eyes narrowed, his gaze sweeping over Keisha's face with a calculating intensity. "It's about his sister, Aaliyah. She's been arrested for drug possession, and we need to ask Jaden some questions." Keisha's heart sank, her mind reeling with the implications of the detective's words. She had never met Aaliyah, had only heard stories of Jaden's troubled younger sister, but she knew how much he loved her, how deeply he regretted not being there for her when she needed him most. "I'll let Jaden know you stopped by," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Thank you for coming." The detective nodded, his eyes still fixed on Keisha's face. "Make sure you do," he said, his voice low and threatening. "And we'll be in touch." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Keisha standing in the doorway, her heart racing and her mind whirling with fear and uncertainty. She closed the door and leaned against it, her eyes squeezing shut as she tried to steady her breathing. She knew that she had to tell Jaden what had happened, but she dreaded the pain and guilt that she knew the news would bring him. Taking a deep breath, she walked back into the bedroom, where Jaden was just beginning to stir. He blinked up at her, a sleepy smile on his face. But the smile faded as he saw the expression on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting up in bed, his voice rough with sleep. Keisha sat down beside him, her hand reaching out to take his. "Jaden, there's something I need to tell you," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's about Aaliyah." Jaden's face paled, his eyes widening with fear and concern. "What happened? Is she okay?" Keisha shook her head, her heart breaking at the pain and worry in Jaden's eyes. "She's been arrested, Jaden, for drug possession." The detective who came to the door said they need to ask you some questions. Jaden's shoulders slumped, his head falling into his hands. "This is all my fault," he whispered, his voice choked with guilt and regret. "I should have been there for her, should have protected her from all of this." Keisha wrapped her arms around him, holding him close as he shook with silent sobs. "See, Jaden, listen to me," she said fiercely, her voice filled with love and determination. "This is not your fault. You did everything you could for Aaliyah, but you were just a child yourself. You can't blame yourself for the choices she made." Jaden looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with pain. "But I'm her brother, Keisha. I'm supposed to keep her safe, to be there for her when she needs me. And I failed her." Keisha cupped his face in her hands, her eyes locked on his. "You didn't fail her, Jaden. You loved her, you did everything you could to protect her, and now we're going to do everything we can to help her. Together." Jaden nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "You're right," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "We're going to get through this. Together. No matter what it takes." Keisha smiled, her heart swelling with love and pride. "That's right, baby. We're in this together, always and forever." They held each other for a long moment, drawing strength and comfort from each other's presence. And then, with a deep breath, they began to plan, to strategize, to do whatever it took to help Aaliyah and keep their family safe. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with challenges and obstacles at every turn. But they also knew that they had each other, that their love was strong enough to weather any storm. And so, with hearts full of hope and determination, they set out to face the future, hand in hand, heart to heart, ready to take on whatever lay ahead. The drive to the city was long and tense, the silence broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional murmur of the radio. Keisha sat behind the wheel, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Beside her, Jaden stared out the window, his jaw clenched and his eyes distant. Keisha knew that he was lost in thought, his mind swirling with memories of his sister and the guilt that he carried with him every day. They had spent the past few days planning and preparing, gathering information about Aaliyah's case and reaching out to old contacts in the city. Jaden had been hesitant at first, worried about dragging Keisha back into the world they had fought so hard to escape. But Keisha had been adamant, her love for Jaden and her determination to help his sister overriding any fear or uncertainty she might have felt. She knew that they were stronger together, that they could face anything as long as they had each other. As they neared the city limits, Jaden turned to Keisha, his eyes searching her face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low and strained. "Oh, we don't have to do this, Keisha. We can turn back, go home, forget about all of this." Keisha reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "I'm sure, Jaden. We're in this together, remember? Aaliyah needs us, and we're not going to let her down." Jaden nodded, his eyes shining with gratitude and love. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for being here, for loving me, for everything." Keisha smiled, her heart swelling with pride and affection. "You never have to thank me for that, Jaden. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." They fell into silence once more, the weight of the task ahead of them settling heavily on their shoulders. But as they drove through the familiar streets of the city, Keisha felt a sense of purpose and determination that she had never known before. They started their search at the courthouse, meeting with Aaliyah's public defender and poring over the details of her case. It was a grim picture, the evidence stacked heavily against her and the prospect of a long prison sentence looming on the horizon. But Keisha and Jaden refused to give up hope, refused to let the system swallow Aaliyah whole. They spent long hours tracking down witnesses, gathering character references, doing whatever they could to build a case for leniency and rehabilitation. It was exhausting work, both physically and emotionally. But they never wavered in their commitment. They leaned on each other for strength and support, their love a constant source of comfort and inspiration. And slowly but surely, they began to make progress. They found a witness who had seen Aaliyah being coerced into carrying the drugs, a former teacher who spoke of her potential and her kind heart. a drug counselor who offered to work with her on a treatment plan. Piece by piece, they built a case for hope, for redemption, for a second chance at life. And when the day of Aaliyah's sentencing finally arrived, they stood together in the courtroom, their hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. The judge was stern but fair, his eyes taking in the evidence and the arguments with a keen and discerning gaze. And when he finally spoke, his words were like music to Keisha and Jaden's ears. Just, in light of the mitigating circumstances and the efforts made by the defendant's family and supporters, he said, his voice ringing out clear and strong, I am willing to offer a sentence of probation and mandatory drug treatment, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. Keisha felt tears of joy and relief streaming down her face, her hand clutching Jaden's so tightly that she thought she might never let go. They had done it. They had given Aaliyah a chance at a new life, a chance to heal and grow and become the person she was always meant to be. As they walked out of the courthouse, their arms wrapped around each other and their hearts full of hope and gratitude, Keisha knew that they had found something precious, something worth fighting for. They had found a family, a bond that could never be broken, a love that could weather any storm. And as they made their way back to the small mountain town that had become their home, they knew that they were ready for whatever the future might bring. They were ready to face the challenges and the joys, the triumphs and the struggles, the laughter and the tears. They were ready to live and love and grow, together, always, and forever. The sun was setting over the mountains when Keisha and Jaden finally pulled up in front of their little cabin, their hearts full of joy and their spirits soaring with triumph. They had done it. They had faced the demons of their past and emerged stronger, more united than ever before. As they stepped out of the car, Keisha felt a rush of emotion washing over her, a sense of peace and contentment that she had never known before. She turned to Jaden, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "We did it," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "We really did it, Jaden. We saved her." Jaden pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a tender, passionate kiss. "We did it together," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "You and me, Keisha. Always and forever." They walked hand in hand into the cabin, their bodies weary, but their hearts full of hope and promise. They had come so far, had overcome so much, and now, standing in the warmth and comfort of their home, they knew that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Over the next few weeks, they settled back into their quiet life in the mountains, their days filled with work and laughter, their nights spent wrapped in each other's arms. But even as they savored the peace and simplicity of their existence, they knew that they couldn't forget about Aaliyah, about the second chance they had fought so hard to give her. They stayed in touch with her as she began her treatment program, offering words of encouragement and support whenever she needed them. And slowly but surely, they watched as she began to heal, to grow, to become the strong, resilient woman they always knew she could be. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the stars twinkling in the sky above, Jaden turned to Keisha, his eyes filled with a tender, unwavering love. "Thank you," he said softly, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Thank you for everything, Keisha. For loving me, for believing in me, for fighting for Aaliyah. I don't know what I would do without you." Keisha smiled, her heart overflowing with joy and affection. "You'll never have to find out," she promised, her fingers intertwining with his. "I'm here, Jaden, always and forever. No matter what happens, no matter what challenges we face, I will always be by your side." Jaden pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her in a warm, protective embrace. "I love you, Keisha," he whispered, his lips brushing against her ear. "More than I ever thought possible. You are my heart, my soul, my everything." Keisha felt tears of happiness welling up in her eyes, her heart so full of love that she thought it might burst. "I love you too, Jaden," she murmured, her face buried in the crook of his neck. "Can Twain. Forever and always, no matter what." They held each other in the moonlight, their bodies swaying gently to the rhythm of their heartbeats. And as they stood there, lost in the warmth and comfort of each other's arms, they knew that they had found something rare and precious, something that most people spent their entire lives searching for. They had found true love, the kind of love that could withstand any storm, overcome any obstacle, endure any hardship. They had found a love that was unbreakable, unshakable, eternal. And as they looked out at the vast expanse of stars above them, they knew that their journey was just beginning, that there were still so many adventures to be had, so many memories to be made, so much love to be shared. But they also knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, hand in hand, heart to heart. They would face it with courage and strength, with hope and determination, with the unshakable belief that as long as they had each other, anything was possible. And so, with hearts full of joy and eyes shining with love, they turned towards the future, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, ready to build a life of happiness, of laughter, of endless love and unbreakable bonds. They were ready to live, to love, to be free. And they knew that as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't overcome, no dream they couldn't make come true. Months passed, and Keisha and Jaden's lives settled into a comfortable rhythm. They woke each morning to the sound of birdsong and the gentle rustling of leaves, the sunlight filtering through the curtains and casting a warm glow over their intertwined bodies. They spent their days working side by side, Jaden in his workshop and Keisha in her garden, tending to the fragile shoots and delicate blooms that had become her pride and joy. In the evenings, they cooked dinner together, laughing and talking as they chopped vegetables and stirred pots, their movements perfectly synchronized after so many years of practice. But even as they savored the simple joys of their everyday lives, they never forgot about Aaliyah, about the promise they had made to stand by her side as she fought to rebuild her life. They visited her regularly, driving down the winding mountain roads to the rehab center where she was staying, their hearts full of hope and encouragement. At first, the visits were difficult, the wounds of the past still raw and painful. Aaliyah was angry and defensive, lashing out at Jaden and Keisha as if they were the enemy, as if they were the ones who had betrayed her. But slowly, gradually, she began to open up, to let down her guard and allow herself to feel the love and support that they offered so freely. Keisha watched with pride as Aaliyah began to blossom, as she started to attend therapy sessions and group meetings, as she learned to confront her demons and build a new life for herself. And Jaden, too, seemed to come alive in his sister's presence, his eyes shining with a fierce, protective love that Keisha had never seen before. One day, as they sat together in the rehab center's sunny courtyard, Aaliyah turned to Jaden and Keisha, her face lined with tears, but her eyes bright with hope. "I know I haven't always been the easiest person to love," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've made so many mistakes, hurt so many people, But you never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself. And I just want you to know how much that means to me, how grateful I am to have you both in my life." Jaden reached out and took his sister's hand, his own eyes brimming with tears. "You're my family, Aaliyah," he said fiercely, his voice choked with emotion. "No matter what happens, no matter what you do, I will always love you, and I will always be here for you, no matter what." Keisha nodded, her own heart swelling with love and pride. "We're in this together, Aaliyah," she said softly, her hand finding Jaden's in a gesture of unity and support. "You're not alone anymore. You have us, and we have each other. And together, we can face anything." Aaliyah smiled through her tears, her face radiant with gratitude and hope. And as they sat there in the warm sunshine, their hands clasped tightly together, Keisha knew that they had found something precious, something unbreakable. They had found a family, a bond that could never be severed, a love that could weather any storm. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what obstacles they might face, they would face them together, united in their strength and their devotion to each other. As the months passed and Aaliyah's treatment progressed, Keisha and Jaden began to plan for the future, to dream of a life beyond the mountains and the memories of the past. They talked of traveling, of seeing the world and experiencing new adventures, of building a home filled with laughter and love and endless possibility. And through it all, they held fast to each other, to the love that had brought them together and the strength that had carried them through the darkest of times. They knew that there would be challenges ahead, that life was never easy or predictable. But they also knew that as long as they had each other, as long as they held on to the love that burned so brightly between them, they could overcome anything. And so, with hearts full of hope and eyes fixed on the horizon, Keisha and Jaden stepped forward into the future, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, ready to build a life of joy, of passion, of unending love, and unbreakable bonds. They were ready to live, to love, to be free, and they knew that as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't achieve, no dream too big, no obstacle too great. They were unstoppable, invincible, eternal, and their love would be their guiding light, their North Star, their forever home. The sun was just beginning to peek over the mountains when Keisha and Jaden loaded the last of their bags into the trunk of their car. They had been planning this trip for months, ever since Aaliyah had graduated from her treatment program and moved into her own apartment in the city. It had been a long and difficult road, but Aaliyah had emerged from the darkness stronger and more determined than ever. She had found a job at a local community center, working with at-risk youth and sharing her own story of recovery and redemption. And every time Keisha and Jaden saw her, every time they heard the pride and purpose in her voice, they knew that all the struggles and sacrifices had been worth it. Now, as they stood together in the driveway of their little cabin, Keisha felt a rush of emotion washing over her. This place had been their sanctuary, their haven, the place where they had found each other and built a life together. And even though they were leaving it behind, even though they were setting out on a new adventure, she knew that it would always hold a special place in their hearts. Jaden must have sensed her thoughts, because he reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. You okay?" he asked softly, his eyes searching her face. Keisha nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'm more than okay," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "I'm happy, Jaden, happier than I ever thought possible. and it's all because of you." Jaden's eyes shone with love and tenderness, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I feel the same way," he murmured, his lips brushing against her hair. "You're my everything, Keisha. My heart, my soul, my home." They held each other for a long moment, savoring the warmth and comfort of each other's embrace. And then, with a final squeeze of their hands, they climbed into the car and set off down the winding mountain road, the sun rising higher in the sky with every passing mile. They drove for hours, stopping only for gas and snacks, their eyes fixed on the horizon and their hearts filled with a sense of freedom and possibility. They talked and laughed and sang along to the radio, their voices blending together in perfect harmony. And when they finally reached their destination, a small, secluded beach town on the coast, they knew that they had made the right decision. The air was warm and salty, the sand soft and white beneath their feet. And as they walked hand in hand along the shore, the waves lapping gently at their ankles, Keisha felt a sense of peace and contentment that she had never known before. They spent their days exploring the town and the surrounding countryside, hiking through lush forests and kayaking on crystal-clear waters. They visited local markets and artisan shops, sampling exotic foods and admiring handcrafted treasures. And every night, they returned to their little rental cottage, where they cooked dinner together and watched the sunset from the porch, their bodies entwined and their hearts beating as one. But even in the midst of all the beauty and adventure, Keisha never forgot about the life they had left behind, about the people who had helped them along the way. She thought of Aliyah, of the strength and resilience she had shown in the face of unimaginable adversity. She thought of the community that had rallied around them, of the friends and neighbors who had offered their support and their love. And as she lay in Jaden's arms each night, listening to the sound of his heartbeat and the gentle whisper of the waves, Keisha knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had found her purpose, her passion, her forever home, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what twists and turns their journey might take, she knew that they would face them together, hand in hand, heart to heart. On their last night in the beach town, Jaden surprised Keisha with a picnic dinner on the sand, complete with candles and a bottle of champagne. As they sat there, watching the stars twinkling in the velvet sky, he turned to her, his eyes filled with a tender, unwavering love. "Keisha," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. You are the love of my life, the other half of my soul, and I can't imagine spending a single day without you by my side." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "I know we've already been through so much together," he said, his voice shaking with nerves and excitement. "But I want to make it official, to show the world that you're mine and I'm yours, forever and always. Keisha, will you marry me?" Keisha felt tears of joy streaming down her face, her heart so full of love and happiness that she thought it might burst. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Jaden, I will marry you. I will be your wife, your partner, your everything, for the rest of our lives." Jaden slipped the ring onto her finger, his own eyes brimming with tears of joy. And then he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion and intensity that took her breath away. They made love there on the beach, the stars shining down on their intertwined bodies, the sound of the waves mingling with their cries of ecstasy. And as they lay together afterwards, their skin damp with sweat and salt water, Keisha knew that she had found her forever home, her forever love. They returned to the mountains a few days later, their hearts full of joy and their minds filled with plans for the future. They were married in a simple ceremony by the lake, surrounded by their closest friends and family. Aliyah stood by their side, her face radiant with pride and love, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. And as Keisha and Jaden exchanged their vows, their voices trembling with emotion and their hands clasped tightly together, they knew that they had found something rare and precious, something that most people spent their entire lives searching for. They had found true love, the kind of love that could move mountains and part oceans, the kind of love that could withstand any storm and overcome any obstacle. They had found a love that was unbreakable, unshakable, eternal. And as they walked hand in hand into the future, ready to face whatever challenges and adventures lay ahead, Keisha and Jaden knew that they were exactly where they were meant to be. They were home, in each other's arms, in each other's hearts, and nothing, not even the darkest of shadows or the deepest of scars, could ever tear them apart. Their love was a force of nature, a beacon of hope in a world filled with darkness and despair. And as long as they had each other, as long as they held fast to the love that burned so brightly between them, they knew that anything was possible, that any dream could come true. They were ready to live, to love, to be free. And they knew that their story, the story of two lost souls who had found each other against all odds, would be a testament to the power of the human spirit, to the resilience of the heart, and the unbreakable bonds of love. And so, with hearts full of joy and eyes fixed on the horizon, Keisha and Jaden stepped forward into their new life, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, ready to build a future filled with laughter and love and endless possibility. They were ready to live happily ever after, in each other's arms, in each other's hearts, forever and always. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.